Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
A very warm welcome to everyone who has tuned in to watch today's episode of Safe and Sound, the Print's limited edition series presented by Facebook. In this series, we talk about the various aspects of the post-COVID world. In this particular episode, we are going to discuss one of the most talked about subject of year 2020, which is COVID-19 vaccines. And to talk on the subject, I have the best experts. Here, I would like to introduce our first guest, Dr. Gagandeep Kang, who is a scientist and is known for her work in developing rotavirus vaccine. Another is Mr. Pankaj Patel, Chairman, Cadila Healthcare, a pharma company who has developed several vaccines and is also developing a vaccine for COVID-19, which is called ZyCoV-D, which is in the phase 3 clinical trials. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining in. I would like to start with Dr. Gagandeep Kang. Ma'am, I would like to ask, aren't you amazed at how quickly the world has been able to develop COVID-19 vaccine? Was this expected, or don't you think this was fast enough?
Thanks for that question, Himani. I think if I look back to what I was saying a year ago, I thought I was being very ambitious in saying that we will have vaccines in 12 to 15 months. And actually, what we've managed to do is get the first vaccines in 10 months. And I think what people need to understand is that this is not because any part of the process has been shortchanged or compromised in any way. What we have been able to do is build on investments that have been made over the last couple of decades in new technologies, in manufacturing processes, in abilities to test rapidly at scale. So that has all been done. Those platforms were available, and we were able to use all of those platforms to develop vaccines quickly. What has been cut short are the processes that usually come between different phases of testing. Usually you do animal studies, then you wait, you get your protocol for phase 1 approved, then you go into humans, you get the results, you develop your phase 2 protocol, that gets approved, then you move onwards. So all those in-between steps take a lot of time. Those steps have been shortened, or we have been able to combine phases of testing, phase 1 and 2 together, or 2 and 3 together, which has resulted in the same quality of data, in some cases much more than is usually used for development of vaccines. So we have the data for all the phases of testing, but we've used our science collaboratively and very, very efficiently. And that's how we are where we are today.
This is a very important key takeaway from Dr. Kang, that nothing has been cut short. All important steps and procedures have been in place, which ensures that the vaccines that have been made are safe and efficacious. So, Dr. Kang, I would also like to add on this that, we have been seeing a huge fall in number of COVID infections in India, and alongside we have also started the vaccination drive. So will it be right to say that we are almost nearing an end for COVID? Very optimistic question.
That is a huge amount of optimism, and I think we don't know enough about the virus to say that. What we are seeing from other parts of the world should teach us that we need to be cautious. We should not declare that everything is over just because cases have come down in India. With what we are seeing in variant strains in other parts of the world, we need to ensure that all the processes that we've been following so far, testing, tracing, isolating, making sure that we wear masks, physical distancing, and rollout of vaccines, all of these need to happen together. I would only feel comfortable saying the worst is over if we are at least 2 or 3 years beyond a sustained decline. Anything shorter than that, I'd be a little nervous about declaring victory.
Very important for everyone to note this. Then I would like to ask Mr. Patel, sir, in case you can just give us a brief introduction about your novel technology platform that you use for ZyCoV-D, and also by when it is likely to be available.
So Himani, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I think it's not a novel platform. This platform has been already used when the SARS infection was there and the MERS infection was there. That time the DNA plasmid vaccines were developed and they had went up to phase 3. To our luck, these viruses were vanished from the world and we didn't have the problem. So I think we selected that platform because it was already a proven platform at that time for doing it. And second thing, we realized that it does not require a specialized isolation area to manufacture because it's a DNA vaccine which can be produced in a normal vaccine manufacturing facility. So that is the reason why we selected this platform and we worked on it, and we are basically currently doing the phase 3 study. The phase 3 study would require to recruit about 30,000 volunteers, and also we'll have to wait till we receive 150 COVID infection among the tested subjects, and then of course we can do it. Given that the COVID infection levels are coming down, we cannot predict when we will hit the target of 150 subjects. But as a company, we are very cautious, and we want to be making sure that we offer a fully tested, efficacious vaccine and safe vaccine. So that is what I can say about the whole thing.
We hope it becomes available soon, because I think that more the merrier is the situation right now. And of course, again, Dr. Kam, I would like to understand, we have till now recorded over 7,800 adverse events, which is just 0.1% of the total vaccinations done. So do you think that we are on the right track, or, when should we be concerned about the adverse events following immunization?
I think we have to understand that adverse events are of two kinds. One is mild adverse events, which will be huge numbers. And, anybody who has a baby knows that, after you give the baby their routine immunization, they'll develop fever, pain, be irritable. That's very common. So among the adverse events that you see being reported in the media, the bulk of them are these mild adverse events: fevers, pain at the site of injection, not feeling good for a day or two. These pass and leave no side effects behind. What we should be concerned about, and something that cannot always be picked up in clinical trials, is serious adverse events. Is there something that goes majorly wrong when you receive a vaccine? Does that result in your needing to be hospitalized? Does that result in a death? Does that result in long-term side effects? Now, as far as we've seen, with all of the vaccines that have been tested, are in testing, or have been rolled out, the only association that we have so far is with anaphylaxis. That's being seen with the mRNA vaccines, and it's a range of somewhere around 1 in 150,000 vaccinated individuals with the Pfizer vaccine, and about 1 in 500,000 vaccinated individuals with the Moderna vaccine. We think that this might be because of polyethylene glycol, which is used to make the lipid nanoparticles for these vaccines. Most of these cases are occurring in people who already have a history of severe allergy or anaphylaxis. And these events happen usually within the first 30 minutes after vaccination. So giving adrenaline or epinephrine can result in a quick reversion to normal. So far, even though this is a serious life-threatening event, nobody has actually died because we were prepared to handle the anaphylaxis. There is so far nothing else that has been associated with severe or serious adverse events with any of the vaccine platforms. That doesn't mean that we should not, we should let our guard down and stop looking now. We still need to have really good pharmacovigilance in place so that when vaccines are used in millions of people, we can continue to monitor the safety of these vaccines.
Oh, definitely. Okay. Mr. Patel, I was reading on Google when I was making the talk points. I understand that in 1995, you had said that in coming decades, India will be known for its R&D. So are we seeing that time already? Because we were generally known as a generic drug maker, a copycat drug maker and all of that. Do you think that with COVID-19 vaccines and the companies like you and Bharat Biotech and many others who are in process of developing COVID-19 vaccine, we have reached to a point where we can be proud of our R&D?
So Himani, one thing is very clear. India has not only R&D capability, but also manufacturing capacity. So India has an R&D and M all in place.
Yes.
Talent already exists. The best of the scientists across globally, you will find many of Indian origin people also are involved in research in various disease areas. So India has a great capability to make that happen. I think this COVID-19 situation actually has created a kind of opportunity for companies to really think again, start again a new drawing board to look at how can we be ahead of others in the world as far as research and development is concerned. So our organization is very focused on that. From 1995, we have said that we have to become a research-based pharmaceutical. And we have been continuously putting effort in building capabilities and developing teams who can do the research activity. And as a result, we do research in not only in vaccinology, but also on small molecule and also in the area of biologics. And we have first novel biologics already approved, which was done in collaboration with WHO. We also have a novel drug approved in India, which is saroglitazar, which is now gone into US for doing study into two important area, which is PBC and NASH. And in fact, we got the orphan drug designation by US FDA, including fast track approval there. We also have a new drug called desidostat. We just completed a phase 2 study in Mexico for the COVID patient. This is basically increases the hemoglobin RBC cell in the blood. And when it is given at an early stage, the patient does not go to ventilation in the trial, which was done in Mexico in phase 2, but the size was small. We still have to do a detailed phase 3 study before we can claim that. We also been working on a monoclonal cocktail, which is going to be another important tool which might be required for treating the disease going forward. So I think we do, and many other drugs and things like that. So I think that India has capability, and Indian companies are now very seriously thinking that it's time to pay back. We have benefited from the research happen across the globe, and we have got medicines. Now we have to do discovery and help the world. Already in the COVID-19 vaccine, we are already seeing this, but more of that will happen as time will progress. Even if you look at medical treatment, all the people are coming from abroad to India for treatment because the treatment which Indian doctors are providing are of the world class and at a very affordable cost. So there is clearly a new model of affordable quality medical care, medicine is emerging out of India.
So then, based on your experience, do you think that this is the right time for the government to partner with the private players as well for the distribution of vaccine? Because till now, the vaccine is only limited to the government-run institutes. And also because though we have been seeing a good number of vaccination targets achieved till now, which is more than 50 lakh people have already been covered. But then we also have to consider that India is a country of more than 300 crore people, and 50 lakh or 60 lakh is just a drop in an ocean kind of a thing. So do you think at some point of time, government will need to partner with the private players?
I think ultimately everybody will have to participate in this. But I think we have to go step by step. I think the government has taken the right step. It's a new thing. We have to do carefully. We have to learn more from the experience which we gain now. So currently it is done in hospital environment under a proper medical supervision. I think next phase will be that we will open up more and more. And ultimately everybody will have to participate into this goal, because it is impossible that one person or one institution or one government alone can do it. It is to be an effort done by everybody together. And also that will also share some of the burden the government has in terms of even financing this. So I would strongly recommend that at least the private sector should come forward and at least vaccinate their employees
Right.
when it is permitted. So that what happens is that more and more people get it. Once we have given large number of people the vaccine, then it is possible that we may start talking about some kind of immunity against the disease.
Good point highlighted by Mr. Patel that at least private sector should come forward and start vaccinating their employees. I'll go back to Dr. Kang. Dr. Kang, what is your view? What has been your experience of rolling out vaccines in the private market? From when government should begin this process, or is it too early?
Usually the way it works for the national immunization program is that vaccines enter the private market first and then come into the public market. So the way decisions are made for vaccinations in the country is usually if a new vaccine is to be considered, then the National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization will review all the evidence about the vaccine, about disease burden, and make a recommendation to the government. And then based on that, the government will decide whether it can afford to give the vaccine to the entire cohort of children. Mostly so far, we've had childhood immunizations. And then the vaccine will be rolled out in a phased manner across different states. But what will usually be happening in the background of all of this is that as soon as a vaccine is available in the West somewhere, that vaccine will do small bridging studies in India, usually from multinational manufacturers, and they will apply for approval to market this in India. So you can take the example of rotavirus vaccines or pneumococcal vaccines. They were available to the middle and upper classes for many years before they became available in the public immunization program. So we have no experience of a situation except for Japanese encephalitis virus, where the vaccine was only available through the government program, and that also in a limited number of districts, of any vaccine coming in for countrywide immunization and being only in the government sector and not being available in the private sector. So this is a new experience. But I agree that, the way we should think about this is that here is where the public has priority. The priority groups have been defined. They should absolutely be immunized first, because right now the supply of vaccines is a rate limiting step. And at a later stage, when there are more vaccines and supply is not such a limitation, then we could think about the private market accessing vaccines. I can also see another situation where, as Mr. Patel pointed out, if we want private companies to immunize their employees, should they be using the vaccine that would otherwise go into the government program? Or should they get vaccines that the government is not planning to access? So, for example, if you bought the Pfizer vaccine at -70, now Pfizer is not going to come to India, so take Moderna, a product that needs to be held at -20. This is not feasible for the whole country's program, but it might be feasible for a private company that decides it wants to immunize its employees. So these are things that will need to be worked out with both policies and engagement of a wide group of stakeholders.
Dr. Kang, when we have started talking about Pfizer, because you must have read that the company was not interested in doing bridging study in India. So do you think that it was wise for the regulator to read the global data that the company was providing? Or do you think that the decision was taken was right, because we always need the local trials here in India, though the Clinical Trial Act now provides for a space not to do trials locally. So do you think that it was a right decision to reject their emergency approval application?
So I think let's look at it from a science perspective, right? Why would you want studies in a local population rather than accepting studies that are done in another part of the world? What could be different? There are essentially two things that could be different. One is the genetic makeup of the people who are getting the vaccine. Now, why does that matter? Do we have any evidence that that matters? We actually do have evidence. If you take the H1N1 vaccine that was developed by GSK, when it was given to people in Scandinavia, there was a side effect called narcolepsy that was seen. Now, narcolepsy is when you fall asleep without being able to predict when that is going to happen. And they were able to do an investigation that showed that it might have been linked to one of the adjuvants that was in the GSK vaccine, but it didn't affect everybody. Why only Scandinavia? It turned out that it was people with a certain HLA type, a certain genetic background. It was an interaction of that genetic background and the adjuvant that led to this side effect. So that is one reason you want to know whether there is any signal. You may pick it up in a small bridging study, you might not pick it up, but at least you have some baseline data to go with. The second is, will people react to this vaccine differently based on their prior experience of infections? So, for example, for rotavirus vaccines or influenza vaccines, the viruses that circulate in India might be different from other parts of the world. So, the pre-existing immune responses that we have might vary. So, the viruses could be different. The immune response background could be different. So, you bring in a new vaccine. What will your immune response to that new vaccine be? It will be determined by these factors that are different for this population. So the reason to do these studies is essentially around genetics and the population characteristics if you're introducing a new vaccine in a population. Does it matter for COVID-19? It's a new disease. It's affecting the whole world. So prior experience might not matter. Genetic background might matter. So I think it's really up to the regulators and the subject expert committee to make a call based on science to decide whether it is or is not required at any point in time.
Dr. Kang, here I would like to add another question, and then I will go to Mr. Patel again. So I've already been noticing vaccine hesitancy. Even there are elections and UTs where the vaccination targets are just less than 30%. So in my part of reporting, I've spoken to those states as well, because majority of them say that there's a vaccine hesitancy, and we must consider that this vaccine hesitancy is among healthcare workers and not the general public. So was this expected, or vaccine hesitancy is always expected? And do we need a separate strategy for this, or the confidence comes on its own when you see more and more people getting the jab and then keeping safe and sound and healthy?
I think the one thing that we have to understand is that the world is changing and people have access to a lot more sources of information than were there before. Some of that information is accurate and some of that information is completely inaccurate. It's meant to give people the wrong picture. Now, how does someone decide who does not have a background in that area what is credible information and what is not credible? Frequently, what we are seeing now is much of this message is wrapped up in pseudoscientific language. So even for somebody who is a healthcare worker who does not have experience in that area, they may have doubts in their mind about whether it really is true information or not, whether it is about safety or about the efficacy of the vaccine. You remember that a lot has been said and, pseudoscientific language from, the virus is because of 5G, or the virus is something that was engineered in a lab.
Yeah.
You can get a lot of information that we don't necessarily have data for. Mm-hmm. And that can lead to even people who have a scientific background, if they're not actually vaccinologists, they might mistrust the information that is provided. So I think the one thing that we have to understand in the future is clear communication, clear, transparent communication saying we know this because of this data set, and we don't know this, we are awaiting the data. So both being able to say what we know, but also saying we are not clear about this, but we are making this decision because we think these are all the reasons for making the decision that we have made. That we don't tend to do. We still operate in a top-down culture where we say, because I'm an expert and I said so, you should believe me. I don't think we should do that anymore.
Mr. Patel, what would you like to say on this? The question is about the vaccine hesitancy. Is it expected? Was it expected? And do you think that there could be a better strategy to remove this, because we are still in the healthcare workers and frontline workers vaccination stage, but in case we plan to go to the general public as well?
So actually, Himani, Dr. Kang has explained even the initial introduction and now that there are no challenges currently we see as far as these vaccines are concerned. Now the problem is that because there is a lot of miscommunication, there is a kind of apprehension in few people. But I think systemically we have to break these myths. We have to educate people to say that there is no problem, no problem, no problem. And finally, people will start understanding that, okay, well, 50 lakh people have taken the vaccine. Nothing really has happened to them. Why should you worry so much? So the question would be, is over a period of time, this will get over. But I think initially, when anything is new, there are always two opinions. And this is bound to happen. But gradually, I'm seeing that gradually people will move toward that, because the benefit of the vaccination is going to be enormous. People have really suffered because of COVID infection. And protection against that infection is a big benefit to people. And they will surely realize one day and start using it more and more.
So right now, addressing our viewers, who are the people who must take the vaccine?
Well, I think I'm not a medical doctor to advise that. I think Dr. Kang would be the right person to advise that. But I think a vulnerable population, as decided by our expert committee in India, is that's one we should do it. So frontline workers, medical workers, followed by the people who are above 50 years of age, people who have comorbid conditions. I think they are to be prioritized. Ultimately, everybody should take vaccine one day, so that we have full immunity.
Right. Dr. Kang, I would like to ask this question again to you, that who are the people who must take the vaccine, and who are the people who will not be able to take the vaccine? I'm not talking about price inequality. It is about the eligibility of taking vaccines according to the health conditions.
So right now, I think though almost everybody is susceptible. So I think everybody should be taking the vaccine, because there is a limit on supply. We have priority groups. But if you think about who should not be taking the vaccine, so far the only contraindication is people with a history of anaphylaxis. We also advise that people who are immunocompromised should be very careful, because they may not be protected by vaccination. We are currently not giving the vaccine to pregnant women or lactating women. That is not because we don't think they should get the vaccine. That is because we don't have data on them having received the vaccine. There have been data on women getting pregnant while being enrolled in phase 3 trials. Those data need to be collated and need to be looked at carefully. In other parts of the world, it's recommended that if you are in a priority group and you are pregnant, then you should consider taking the vaccine. That's not a recommendation for India at this time, but that may also change as we get more and more data, both from our own country as well as from other parts of the world.
And I'm sure various people would like to know that should they take the vaccine if they have got COVID infection once?
So the recommendation there is yes, because we don't know how predictable protection from prior infection is. It is very likely that you will have some level of protection if you have had COVID before. There are data to show 83% protection for at least 5 months, which is as good as we know of a vaccine right now, but we don't know how long protection lasts. So the idea is, even if you've been infected before and you're in a priority group, consider taking the vaccine. WHO says that you can potentially wait 6 months after infection to get the vaccine if there is a supply shortage. But the logistics of that waiting, getting it later, becomes a little bit complicated. So my advice would be, if it's your turn to get a vaccine, just get it.
Okay. Mr. Patel, because you are also a pharma industry expert, I would like to understand that do you think the government needs to have a special strategy in place whenever they plan to roll out the market in the whenever they plan to roll out the vaccine in the private market? Because I understand the concerns coming from the government about the black marketing, overcharging, and leakages in the supply chain. So do you think that government should prepare a strategy from now on, whenever they plan to roll out the vaccine in the near future in the private space?
So whenever government decides to roll out the vaccine available in private space, these kind of challenges would definitely will come up. But by that time, I would expect that a lot of abundance of vaccine is available. Government itself is giving free vaccination to large number of populations. So at that stage, the opportunity to really use this as a black marketing tool will be limited. However, this is more a vigilance and control issue, which is where the regulatory agency, the police, and everybody should be vigilant about it and stop such things happening. But that should not be deterrent to making vaccine available to people at large.
Right. And about the pricing, sir, because we have so far seen that the pricing that all the players into the COVID-19 vaccine category have ensured of a reasonable pricing. So do you think that pricing will remain any issue further?
No, I don't see a challenge.
Your vaccine as well.
Himani, one thing you should understand. Vaccines have been always reasonably priced. If you see many of the vaccines which I and you and our children have taken, they have been very reasonably priced. So vaccine now has always been a very reasonably priced. And I do not see that COVID vaccine is a different thing. So these vaccine also would be also reasonably priced.
And have you arrived at an estimate for ZyCoV-D as of now, sir?
It's too early to comment about the price. Let us complete the clinical study and then we can talk about price. But don't worry, we will not give you a shock.
No, we always know that. And so by when it is likely to be available, or by when you are likely to present the data for the phase 3 trials? I know this is too early to ask.
It's a moving target. I cannot say. Our estimate is that by May, we should have the data. But it depends upon when we get these 150 subjects who have got the COVID infection, which is also with symptoms. And then we can say, okay, we're hit the end point, and now we can analyze the data and say, yes, our vaccine is efficacious and to what percentage it is efficacious. And then we can go to the regulator. I don't see the regulator will take long time to get approved, but I have to present the data.
Yes. So vaccines are safe. Vaccines will be reasonably priced. If you are getting the chance to get the jab, take it. These are the key takeaways. And it was an insightful discussion. I told you I have the best people to talk on this subject. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you, Himani.
Thank you, Himani.